Welcome to Oakville's West Harbour Historical Walking Tour. We hope that you'll find this interesting enough that one day you might want to try the walk for yourself. Assuming you will drive to the starting location, it is suggested that you head along Oakville's Lakeshore Road until you get to Chisholm Street. Turn on Chisholm Street toward the lake, follow it all the way down to the bottom, and turn left on Walker Street. This takes you down the small hill to the lake and the larger car park. But we suggest that you park in one of the smaller car parks before you actually go down to the lake, as that's where our walk will start. Now that you've parked your car, we're going to head toward the historical information kiosk and the Tannery Park sign at the base of the hill. This is our starting point, and we'll circle back here at the end of the walk. Feel free to explore the historical information on the first of two kiosks that we will encounter on this walk. Then we're going to head up the hill toward the stone cairn. The stone cairn was built as recognition to the brave men of HMCS Oakville, a World War II corvette. More on this shortly. We keep going up the hill toward the Tannery Park observation deck. Remember I said there'd be more information on HMCS Oakville? Well, here it is. Just before you step onto the deck, take the time to read about the brave men who sunk a U-boat during World War II, in part by ramming it. A two-man boarding party boarded the U-boat's deck and secured its capture by killing 2 men and securing the rest as prisoners before it sank. Actually, this was such a famous event that a World War II poster was made about it. But let's go on to the deck. Here you have some excellent views of Lake Ontario and the harbour. Let's take the time to enjoy them, and the spectacular flowers if you're lucky enough to see them, while I share a little bit of history about the hill. The Tannery Park area was set aside as a reserve from the very earliest town plans. You can see in this image that there was once a small ferry across the harbour to the hill. For the second half of the 19th century, this was a popular picnic spot for locals and day trippers who came from the big city, Toronto. From 2014 to 2016, major restoration and redevelopment took place and saw construction of the lookout platform and its stylized commemoration of the Tannery Chimney, which was a landmark for generations of lake sailors. More about the Tannery later on our walk. We are now ready to leave the deck and head down toward the lake. There are 2 ways to do this. At the sign, you can turn left or right. If you go left, it takes you down the hill via a gentle incline. When you get to the bottom, you'll turn right with the lake on your left and keep walking. You'll walk by some silver plaques embedded in stone, which we'll talk about a bit later as we'll come back along this way. But you could also turn right at the sign and follow the path to a set of stairs. Both ways take you to the same spot, from where we will continue our walk. Following the path along, enjoying the views of course, we come to a treaty land sign next to a moccasin circle. We acknowledge and thank the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation for being stewards of this traditional territory. The Moccasin Identifier Project is an interesting way to help share and identify different styles of moccasin. There are 10 images imprinted in the rocks in this circle. So now we are headed back the way we came, with the lake on our right this time, but we'll head back by way of the beautiful butterfly and bird gardens. These small gardens are designed to do exactly as they say, attract butterflies and birds, and they really do work. I said we would come back to the silver plaques, and here we are. These plaques are called Rooted in the Land, and they describe a high-level indigenous timeline in the area, long before European settlers arrived. We keep going across the main Tannery Park car park, and along the west bank and the mouth of the 16-mile creek, up a short hill to a path. Here we can look across the harbour to the east bank, where you can see the blue building. This is the Oakville Water Air Rescue Force, or tow wharf. From the very beginning, the natural harbors, creeks, and Lake Ontario have played an important role in Oakville's history, but an organized search and rescue organization was not formed until 1954. Slightly to the left of the tow wharf building is the Ercles Estate, which was once home to Oakville's founding family, the Chisholms, who owned the estate from the early 1830s to the 1960s. Today, the main building is the setting for Oakville's Community Museum. Also on the estate is the Oakville Historical Society and the Coach House, a former stable. Very close by the estate, in Lakeside Park, is the Thomas House. The home was built in 1829 as the original farm home of the Thomas family. The Thomas House is furnished and presented as a pioneer home from 1829 to the 1840s. There are many original family items in the home. Next to the Thomas House is Oakville's original 1835 post office, also open for about 6 months of the year. Our West Harbour tour continues. On the left, we see 5 large stones carved with names. They represent the names of just a few of Oakville's famous early vessels. We don't have time to cover a detailed history of them, but here is a brief overview. The Pinta was a stone hooker boat similar to the ones pictured here. It lifted stone slabs off the bottom of the lake used in building. It was a hard, dangerous job. Unfortunately, the Pinta and its 3-person crew were lost in a snow squall in November 1879. On July 1st, 1867, almost 7,000 people gathered along the banks of the 16-Mile Creek to witness the launch of George Chisholm's new schooner, the White Oak. George's 10-year-old daughter, Kate, christened her White Oak as a tribute to the Oakville's founder, William Chisholm, whose indigenous nickname was also White Oak. The Seagull was a 238-ton ship, 105 feet in length, 22-foot beam, and drew only 10 feet of water. With a carrying capacity of 10,000 bushels, a medium-sized schooner, she made the journey to South Africa and back in one season, a trip called probably the most noteworthy of any lake sailing ship at the time. Cecil G. Marla, the wealthy owner of the Oakville Tannery and a keen sailor, commissioned local shipbuilder Captain James Andrew to build the Aggie. Launched in 1887, Aggie was named for C.G. Marlet's wife and became the most successful boat in Royal Canadian Yacht Club history with 83 victories. At the height of the steamboat era in 1899, the Oakville Navigation Company purchased the White Star to run between Oakville and Toronto. It was a popular ship for Sunday school picnics. Unfortunately, she burned up in 1903 and was not replaced. A little further along, there are 5 information plaques. The information describes Oakville's early industries, including shipbuilding, watercraft, lumber, coal, and grain. We will continue along the pedestrian walkway behind Oakville Yacht Squadron, which was founded in 1946, and we come across a lighthouse. The first Oakville lighthouse, rising 42 feet above the water, was built in 1836 under the direction of William Chisholm. A storm with 35-foot waves toppled and destroyed that light in April 1886. The replacement, the one you're looking at, was completed in the spring of 1889, which was finally replaced in 1960. This lighthouse is one of the few 19th century wooden lighthouses remaining on Lake Ontario. On January 9, 1991, the lighthouse was declared a heritage structure and bears a plaque to commemorate that event. Looking across again to the east bank, you can see the Oakville Club, which is a members-only club established in 1907. You can also see the granary. The granary was built in 1855 as a simple grain warehouse. It was built with two types of stones. The white limestone came as ballast from Kingston, Ontario, and the darker stone, shale, was taken locally out of Lake Ontario by sailors on stonehooker boats like the Pinta. Although the property is now being used as office space, the original integrity of the building has been retained, and the structure is the only remaining grain warehouse on its original site in Ontario. We are now entering Shipyard Park, where there are a few interesting historical things to check out. Can you see the log cabin? The Lion Cabin, originally situated north of Oakville Town Hall on Trafalgar Road, was built around 1820 when the area was known as Vennerville, a venture that was doomed when the 7th Line Plank Road, now known as Trafalgar Road, was installed to provide passage for traffic bringing goods to the mills at the south end of the 16-mile creek. It failed to stand up to the heavy winters, and the dream of an upper village came to naught for Arthur Cole Venner. English immigrants George and Mary Lyon moved in around 1879. They raised 9 children in the home. It is not open to the public, but it's still interesting to enjoy from the outside. Just opposite the cabin facing the creek, near some bushes, we can see an old piece of railway track. That's what's left of the marine railway which ran down into the creek. That angled inlet was dug for it. A cradle was pulled down into the water, a boat was moved onto the cradle, and then the cradle was pulled out using the winch. Greased timbers ran parallel to the creek, and the cradles were pushed or pulled along so that the boats could be stored for the winter or moved into the large shed that was once close to the bridge. Walking a bit further down along the path, we come to the second historical information kiosk, which mainly covers stories about the harbour's past. We are heading back along the way we came, but we're going to cut through the gap behind the cabin onto the road, being very careful of the traffic. We're going to head up toward Lakeshore Road and then turn right on the bridge to look at the harbour. From here, you can get a great view of the 16-mile creek harbour, but of course, it did not always look this way. Here are a few older views of the harbour from between 1890 and 1906. They give you an idea of what the harbour used to look like compared to today. It was much more of a working harbour back then for shipbuilders and merchants. Owned by the Chisholm family from 1829 until 1874, Oakville was the only privately owned harbour in Canada. Do you see the tall Tannery chimney in the right of the picture? That's where we're headed next, the last stop on our historic walk today. Go back along the bridge to Forsyth Street and turn left, again watching for traffic. Bonus fact, now you know Chisholm Street was named after Oakville's founder, Colonel William Chisholm. The building was originally built in 1836 for the Oakville Brewing and Distilling Company. Then it became a tannery in 1856. By the late 1800s, the Marlott and Armstrong Company owned the tannery buildings and expanded its operation. Yes, it was the same Marlott that owned the racing yacht Aggie we talked about earlier. By the First World War, the tannery was one of the largest in Canada. The machinery ran on steam, and the sound of the steam whistle became familiar amongst the residents. Many people actually relied on the steam whistle for the time. The sound of the steam whistle was also a fire alarm. It would sound if there was a fire, signaling the location by the number of whistle blasts. When the fire alarm at the town hall stopped working during a fire in 1911, it was actually the steam whistle from the Marlott and Armstrong factory that signaled firefighters where to go in the town hall. The tannery stopped operations in 1925, and in 1948 the building was completely destroyed by fire. The tannery buildings were mostly demolished in the 1980s. Now you know why Tannery Park is called what it is, and why the sculpture is representative of a tall chimney that stood at the entrance of the harbour for over 100 years. We are going to turn down the path alongside the brick townhouses to an information plaque about the tannery where you can read a bit more about its history. From here, we follow the path along a little ways back to the area where you likely parked your car. We hope that you've enjoyed this historic overview of Oakville's West Harbour and that you get a chance to see it for yourself one day. Till the next time. Looking for more great content like this? Why not check out the Oakville Historical Society's website, YouTube channel, or Facebook and Instagram pages.